This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid-state, turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Raghu Bala, and this is going to be a fun one, by the way, guys. I've got him here, and he's the CEO and founder of NetObjex, which was recently purchased by Kresus Labs, and now he's the CTO at Kresus Labs. He's also been a contributing editor to a book called Step into the Metaverse, and he's working on a project right now to teach people about blockchain. And he's also been an educator for many years. So me and him have that in common, teaching at the college level. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about Web3 today and why that's important for tech leaders to stay focused on that. And with all that being said, Raghu, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, John.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are today and what your career journey has been like.
Sure. So I'm originally from Singapore, and very early on, I looked up to some, I'd say, mentors or role models, more like role models, in the form of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. When I was growing up, when I was very young, I was only about 12, and I started to I take a computer programming class. One of my friends dragged me out for a summer class, and I knew very little, and it was the Radio Shack TRS-80, my first computer that I ever used. And this was back in, I think, 1979 or 80 or something like that. And ever since then, I got hooked, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so for me, this whole journey has been a journey of passion, more than I don't look at it as work. And so I've seen a lot of things in the industry, obviously, over the years. And I still am pretty hands-on, and I still code and things like that. But during this journey, I've had the experience of working with some larger companies like Yahoo, Infospace, Pricewaterhouse, and so on. But at the same time, I've also had the opportunity to be part of or started some startups, which ultimately got sold to, some were sold to public companies, and the latest one, which I just exited, got sold to a private company in the Bay Area. So I, I'd say I've been at it for a very long time. So.
Awesome. So I know you focus a lot right now, you've been focusing a lot on the Web3 technologies. And for some of us old geeks that may have not stayed as current as we should because we've switched over and started focusing more on management, can you tell me a little bit about what is Web3? What are NFTs? What is the Metaverse? What is all those things that are wrapped up in this Web3 label?
That's a very good question, John. Actually, it's a fun question. It's also quite amorphous. When I say amorphous, because the definition, I don't know if anyone has one definition of Web3, but let's begin at one place and then we'll end up somewhere else. So the beginning is basically if you look at Web2, it's dominated by the FANG companies, right? Your Facebooks, your Apples, your Amazons, Netflix, Google, and so on, and Microsoft, and so on. They're all, they have SaaS services, and all of your data is sort of centralized, and these companies are, wield a lot of power. And so the Web3 movement, at least from the blockchain perspective, and that's not the only perspective, but from the blockchain perspective, it involves decentralization, which is decentralizing the data. You own the data. It's borderless. You democratize the data. There's no, and that borderlessness also permeates into things like money, and so there's a kind of a anti-establishment movement against using fiat currency, use cryptocurrency. So there's a almost like Web3 is less a technology and more of a movement, the way I look at it. And that movement is the core of it is blockchain and decentralization. Just hold on, printer. Okay, so blockchain and decentralization is at the core of it, and that's where a lot of the things have begun. Now, there are other technologies that have come into the Web3 sort of vernacular, and there are some other, I would say Web2 technologies that add a lot of value to Web3 as well. So let's go there next. So, for instance, I look at IoT as in the broader context as being part of the Web3 ecosystem. So why is it part of it? Because you can collect data through sensors and so on. And so you have input coming in from various sources. This might be stored in a decentralized system and so on. And that makes it pretty interesting. The other sort of technology that's also in the mix, in my opinion at least, is AI. So AI can be leveraged in a number of different ways in this Web3 mix, but blockchain is the sort of the center of the puzzle. And then we talked about Metaverse also. So a lot of people look at cryptocurrency as the first use case for blockchain, but I'd say a close second that's coming up now is the Metaverse. So Metaverse also depends on blockchain technology, at least not for the gamification and rendering and things like that, which most people use Unity or Unreal Engine, but it is used for the economic part of the metaverse, like how you pay for things and how you view things and how you get entrance to things. All of that is using tokens and cryptocurrency, and that's where blockchain gets involved.
So I don't know, like maybe I'm just I've dabbled with Unity in building some mobile apps. I used to build quite a bit of those back in the day. When about a few years ago when iPhones first came out, I was developing a lot of those apps, and I've kind of tapered off away from that lately. But what is new with Unity when it comes to like I've got an Oculus, I play some VR games, and how is the metaverse related to that?
So what happens is, if you build a game and you have a single player, multiplayer mode, and so that game experience is central to the metaverse story. And the metaverse, I look at it as a continuum. Like so I'm going to date myself a little bit here. So you had green screens, and then you went to Apple came out with the mouse, and you went to a kind of a mouse-based interface. And then the web came and it sort of changed how interfaces look like. And that has been with us for what now, almost 28 years, 25 to 30 years almost. So now there's and then in between we had obviously mobile, mobile front ends and mobile phones and so on were there. I think if you look at this as a continuum, metaverse is nothing but a three-dimensional way of viewing the internet. And so instead of viewing a two-dimensional website, which you scroll up and down, you now enter a website. You almost walk into it, and you can browse around in a different way. Is this relevant for everything? I don't think so. I think it's relevant for certain things, but it's not maybe relevant for certain other things. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So I advise a company in the metaverse space. And this company is involved in education. So one of the things in education that we are focusing on, and it's almost like the elevator pitch that I am preparing for them, which is if you look at kids education, and if you go to any K through 12 school, there are field trips, right? So you take the kids to a field trip. So you go to the aquarium, you go to the zoo, you do whatnot, wherever you go. Now, what if I told you that you need to go to the moon or to the pyramids or walk on Mars? You cannot do that.
Right.
So the pitch is, don't go on a field trip, bring the field trip to the classroom. It's like the reverse. Okay. So basically, the kids can go to the pyramids, can go to Machu Picchu, can go to walk on the moon or on Mars. And that experience is very hard. You can't do it in the real world. And here you can actually do it, and it's immersive. and kids get to learn a lot about these things which they can't otherwise learn. The same thing, one more example would be in the world of, I think, math, because I have an undergrad in math, and I look at math as being very poorly taught actually worldwide, and not taught well, because books and videos are a bit better than books for sure, but they enable you to visualize things in math which are very hard to visualize. So through Metaverse, I think we can bring about better sort of instruction for math, and also for things like anatomy, certain types of biological sciences, and so on. So there's a huge opportunity in education in the Metaverse. And similarly, there are other domains like, that we can talk about as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like, one of the cool things when I first got my Oculus, there's this space station game, and I had my kids play that, and they're like, "Wow, is this really what it looks like?" I'm like, "It's pretty close. It's not not real, but it's pretty close. It gives you that feeling that you're right. You can't take a kid on a field trip to outer space, but if you put on a headset and go, you can kind of get a little bit of that experience. And there's another game that's for the Rift that I play that lets you kind of be shrunk down and get inside the body, and you see like your vascular system and your anatomy from the inside, which is really cool. And it's something like I showed my kids, and they didn't have that concept of what was going on inside your body until they were able to play that game. So yeah, it's definitely a really cool use case for that.
Yeah, no, I think education is going to be very much impacted and changed and improved through the Metaverse. And also there's a lot of gamification. Like, I was talking to someone, and I was talking about this concept, and they said, "Oh, what if we created a kind of a scavenger hunt on the Metaverse? So you walk around, but you have to turn, almost you have to click things, you have to turn things, you have to move things, you have to uncover things, and then there's a prize for that. And during that process, you learn a bunch of things." And that's, I think, the types of way in which curriculums would be, changed, so that you gamify the education experience. I think that's going to happen. One other area I want to touch on is also in certain types of industrial use cases, like repairs and training and so on, for automotive engineering, let's say. And so if you go to for trainings, mechanical and automotive engineering, you have to take a car, you have to take it apart, you have to, it's a lot of work to actually teach someone how to fix a car, let's say, or fix a plane for that matter. But the Metaverse, through the use of sort of virtual reality technology and so on, now you're able to enable someone to visualize things without having to pull apart a lot of things. I mean, they might still have to do it in the real world, but at least you can do a first cut of imparting of the knowledge through virtual means, and that goes a long way towards someone understanding things. And they can also, we have the choice of sort of messing up things or screwing up things without having to pay the penalty of screwing up real equipment. You can actually, it's virtual, right? So you can get it right. And I know for a fact that in spine surgeries nowadays, in certain places, what they're doing is, in spine surgeries, there is very little room for error. So what happens is, surgeons are practicing on virtual systems like the Metaverse, trying to almost attempt the surgery a couple of times before they go and do the real one. And that's kind of cool, because you want your surgeon to be like, ready, because there's no room here to make an error. So it might be a difference between you walk or you never walk at all. so those types of things.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the mechanical thing, with the airplanes and engines, there's actually a Rift app that I downloaded that was free, that lets you take apart an engine and put it back together, like it's like a V6 or V8 car engine. And just playing with that took me back to my old days with my dad. We used to like rebuild cars back, in the 80s and 90s. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This kind of reminds me of that, but it gives you that same kind of learning experience without having to take apart an engine,
Absolutely. So I think that's another area. And then a lot of people who are starting to do fashion shows.
That's a good use case.
There are fashion shows which we often read about in Paris, Milan, London, New York. But if you are not in one of those areas and you happen to be interested in the fashion show, The fashion show maybe occurs at a venue where maybe it can seat 500 people, but if you are remote, how are you going to participate? Now you go to the metaverse, you can have a front row seat, so that's kind of interesting. Same thing they're doing at concerts. Like there were concerts on the metaverse last year where 50,000 people attended on the metaverse virtually. So there are many types of things where entertainment, fashion is being modified, changed, on the metaverse. And I look at it as, I'm not saying it'll replace the real world, it'll replace the web. It's just another avenue, and we have to pick and choose which use cases make sense and not just force it, for the sake of, using the metaverse. But I think it can be very interesting, very interesting. So
yeah, I agree. I'm really looking forward to it for more entertainment. I know some of the games that I've played have just been unreal. I'm a Star Wars geek. I like Star Wars stuff, so I played all the Darth Vader games on there, and that the other Star Wars games that are on there, and they're all like so, they put you in that feeling, and it feels so awesome. And you're right. I envision a future where you can buy Super Bowl tickets and be sitting right on the 50-yard line in the metaverse watching the Super Bowl for really cheap, and have like I said, 50,000 people watching the Super Bowl with
and actually you're watching the real game. I mean, the guys are on the field, let's say wherever they're playing the Super Bowl in New Orleans or in Tampa or wherever. And then, but then you're not sitting in the stadium, you're sitting in the metaverse, and you have fans next to you, you get all the crowd noise, the whole ambiance, but then you're actually watching the real game. So it's like they call it mixed reality. And actually I just saw a video on LinkedIn, I think, last week, where there was a hockey game in Canada somewhere, and I think it was Chipotle. So Chipotle brought a kind of a big Chipotle bowl to the middle of the hockey rink, and then like it was mixed reality. You had to watch it through your phone or something like that, and then a big hand, like a giant arm, popped up from under the hockey rink and smashed and grabbed the Chipotle bowl and took it into its layer below. So it was kind of funny, but it was so real. I mean, you couldn't see the difference between that and reality. It was kind of mixed. They call it mixed reality. And so we're going to see some interesting stuff coming up here.
So what do you think is going to happen with like, I know Snap has like some glasses. Google came out with some glasses that kind of like, tanked. And then, there's different Echo glasses. There's things that are going on with that AR type environment. And, I envision a day when, where you have something that's really thin, low profile type glasses, and you can go running. And while I'm running, I'll see messages from someone before me like, hey, there's, dog poop on the road on the left, get on the right hand side or something like that, where people can tag things. And as you're going, or maybe you look at a tree and it tells you what kind of tree that is or what kind of flower that is, right in your glasses. Do you see something like that happening in the near future, or how far away is that?
Yeah, I think, I was actually the CTO of automotive.com for about, 9 years. And I got to know a lot about the automotive space and used to attend all the major events like SEMA and other things. And I bring up automotive as an example because almost the first use case for virtual reality, more than humans using goggles, is going to be your windshield in a car that is going to become a kind of a translucent screen where you can actually see through. You can see the traffic and all that. But if you turn on a certain mode, you can actually see some of the types of things you're talking about, like it could show like accident down the street 2 blocks down the street, or if you were looking for a gas station, it could show you visually a gas station. Even though today we look at the map and you might get it, but my wife is on my case all the time because she says like the map is there but you don't read it well. And sometimes because what happens is the map sometimes says it shows that you have to take a right turn, but it's not immediate right turn. It's about maybe a couple of right turns down the road. So sometimes it doesn't, show the distance as accurately as possible. Whereas with a more of a virtual reality type lens on top of your windshield, you can actually see like, okay, gas station, take a right now, and it can actually make it more closer to reality than what is available today, which is like one step away. The map is like one level removed. This will make it a little bit more closer to reality. Or if you're looking for a McDonald's or whatever it might be, you can see that it's in this plaza or whatever it might be. So a lot of things like that in the auto space is going to happen very, very soon, I believe. Second one, I think the human beings wearing the goggles. The only thing that I would say from a from a practical standpoint, I'm like you, I got into Google Glass very early, and it didn't take off, and that happens a lot with technology, right? We've seen that over and over again. Palm Pilot came, didn't succeed. iPhone won the thing later on, 10 years later. Or even Newton was there from Apple, which didn't take off, and then iPhone won the wars on the PUDA phone handheld device section. So a lot of times these types of things happen where a technology comes in, fails, and then it gets reintroduced a decade later, and it will succeed. So I expect the same thing, like a Google Glass Part 2 or equivalent thing. But the thing between Google Glass versus, let's say, a Oculus thing is very immersive. So you really have to, you cannot be outside. You have to be in a room and going through the experience. Whereas like Google Glass, the idea was to kind of mix it with you walking down the street and being able to see something on the lens. So the kind of a mixed reality type of thing. So I think the mixed reality thing, I'm looking forward for it to come back. And I think 5G with its more highly dense network could actually play a role in that. In terms of movement of data and things like that, because I don't think we can some of these technologies we cannot wait for it to hit the cloud, and it needs to hit a more nearer cloud, so to speak. So I've been in certain meetings with certain companies which are working on infrastructure that enables that to happen. Once that happens, then you're going to see more of the driverless cars, more of the Google Glasses type things, and so on, because your latency improves significantly. But anyway, I think I'm looking forward to those innovations coming back. But the immersive Oculus thing, I think it's okay for certain things, but I think for general purpose business users, I don't know whether that that might work for certain things like training of personnel and things like that, but not for everything. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it just seems a little weird for like meetings and sales calls and things like that. But
right.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I agree with you on training. I think training would be really cool. And like you talked about, field trips for education makes perfect sense. And I mean, there's like a really popular app on Oculus where it's Anne Frank. We can go through like Anne Frank's home and see what that was like, and that's really cool. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about blockchain and what is it that we tech leaders need to know when it comes to blockchain. If we're not using it today, maybe our companies are more traditional in the tech space and we haven't moved over into that. What do we need to know? What do we need to be paying attention to that may affect us?
Yeah, I think blockchain can be used in a number of ways, and I think sometimes in a kind of a unfortunate way, the cryptocurrencies were the first use case for blockchain for moving funds and so on. And actually, they are very the cryptocurrency way of moving funds has been very efficient compared to, let's say, going through your bank to wire funds and things like that. So it is a very efficient mechanism, but it gets painted with a bad, stroke of paint or bad brush.
Yeah, I mean, basically, when you hear crypto, a lot of people in my field think of cybercrime. They think of ransomware.
Yeah, exactly. So it's become like that. That has really spoiled it for cryptocurrency. But the underlying technology, blockchain itself, I think what we are seeing today is the first iteration of what we call distributed ledgers. So blockchain is not the only type of distributed ledger. Just like saying aircraft, you can have helicopters, you can have jet planes, you can have all kinds of aircraft. So blockchain is one type of distributed ledger. There's other types like directed acyclic graphs and so on. So certain coins and certain technologies like Filecoin and so on use directed acyclic graph, and then some use blockchain like Ethereum and so on. Now that underlying plumbing itself, I think, will go through certain iterations and improvements over time. Today's technology is okay, but then I think we'll see quantum leaps in that improved chains coming up in the next few years. Just like when we looked at search engines, the first few were Alta Vista and Excite and so on. and then those got replaced by Google ultimately. So you're gonna see, I think, iterations in that space. But from a business perspective, I think main thing to think about is decentralization, whether you want to share data with your ecosystem partners. Today, people share data with ecosystem partners in a number of ways. The very low-tech way of sharing it would be to email them something. The kind of a little bit more sophisticated way of sharing things would be maybe you want to, some people share documents in Dropbox and things like that. And then even more sophisticated would be to open up web services such that your systems have got web services that your partners can tap into through API calls and stuff like that. So there are many ways of sharing information, and blockchain can be thought of as another way of sharing information with ecosystem partners having access to the same data at the same time, so that no one partner can fudge things or change things or modify things. And you might be surprised that happens a lot in various supply chain ecosystems and things like that. So this provides a degree of transparency so that all the participants can see the same thing. So these ecosystems could be healthcare, where you have health insurance companies, you have pharmacies, you have hospitals, doctors, patients, and all of them need to see what medicine is being prescribed, whether there is a drug, if a person taking two drugs, they might interact with one another and cause some problems. So you can see all of the information at one shot within a permission blockchain type of environment. Same thing in supply chain. You have logistics companies, you have manufacturers, you have buyers, sellers, banks, insurers, everyone involved in supply chain. They all need to see the same data at the same time. Today, the system is very sort of fragmented, where people send information to one another through email, sometimes fax, sometimes phone calls. It's all not in the same place, and things along the way sometimes break. So we can improve those supply chain inefficiencies through the use of blockchain. So those are two that I can just quote off the top of my head. There are many others, like food traceability is another one, where a lot of I've worked on several projects where people want to track where the food came from, whether it was ethically farmed, whether it's really organic when they say it's organic, those types of things, like what they call farm to fork use cases, things like that. So.
Yeah, I hear it a lot when it talks about digital contracts and keeping changes of contracts and things going on, and especially like I work in the media industry of keeping licenses and agreements, and when like if you create a movie and you want to license it to Netflix for a certain date and Amazon in this country, and but not in this country, and if you do it with this soundtrack and so on and so forth, keeping track of all of those type of licenses is kind of one of the use cases that I've heard a lot of blockchain.
That's a good use case. That's a good use case. Actually, in the course that I teach blockchain and AI for MIT Sloan Online through the GetSmarter platform, and one of the use cases actually for a media company. And the idea is, to use blockchain to kind of improve the efficiencies in that space. And one of the inefficiencies in the space is revenue attribution, like the artists, all the people involved in the production of a piece of music or a movie or whatnot don't get their fair share. And sometimes they have no transparency. They don't know how many times the music was played in an elevator or in a hotel or in a mall or in the radio stations or TV or whatnot. So they want to know, hey, I created this piece of music. It's being played everywhere. When I see my check, it looks much smaller than what it should be. So if we track these licenses much better, like what you mentioned, then you can see the proof of play, and then nobody will have any qualms that I'm being underpaid or things like that. And what you brought up is very interesting. Like if a particular piece of movie is over OTT, it's on Prime one week and then Hulu next month or whatever it might be, then you can track who accessed it and things like that. So yeah, it's blockchain is very good for those types of things.
Yeah, it's extremely exciting to see kind of how that's going. And one of the things that I've seen recently, and maybe you can shed some light on this or tell me that it's stupid, is that some companies have offered the ability to kind of remove entries from blockchains. And I don't know if that's even possible, but I've seen that with like ransomware services and things like that, where they said, oh, we can remove the fact that you paid this ransom off the blockchain.
I don't know. I've never heard of that.
I think the only way that would be possible is if they had more than 51% of the nodes on that specific chain. Would that not be correct?
No, actually, what happens in blockchain is actually immutable by default. It's immutable in the sense that you cannot erase what's already there, but what you can do is replace, not replace, actually, you can write another record to adjust the entry. Like, in accounting, actually, if I owe you, $100 and I recorded I owed you $100, but I made a mistake, not actually 100, I owed you 1,000, then we can create two entries, one to cancel my $100 entry and then put a new entry for $1,000 instead of going there and erasing the 100 and putting another zero. That's not actually technically allowed. So you have this sort of adjusting entries that you do to correct mistakes, errors, things like that. So I don't know how they're saying that they can override.
I think it's probably just a scam trying to get people that may have gotten hit with ransomware and paid for it and wanted to kind of remove the fact that they paid for it so that their cyber insurance doesn't go up or something like that.
It's because what happens is in blockchain, every entry has got a certain origin, and that origin happens to be a wallet ID or account ID, whatever you want to call it. And so if it's there, it's there. And recently I had a dispute with a cryptocurrency exchange, and I could easily prove that certain transaction happened because I point them to the fact that my wallet ID, and I went into the actually Ethereum blockchain and showed them, see, my entry is right here. And so that's the beauty of this thing, because now, like the same thing with the credit bureaus, you cannot see what's inside the database. And this happened to me not long ago. My wife had a small fender bender. Nothing happened. I mean, like some car hit her in the back, but wasn't even a scratch. Didn't go to any police report. Nothing. I mean, didn't go anywhere. I mean, no repairs, nothing. Not even a scratch. But they hit. Okay, just touched. Okay, but then what happens is later on when I'm like trying to trade in my car, the dealer tells me, "Oh yeah, there are 2 accidents on your record." I said, "What? What 2 accidents?" He said, "Oh, there was a thing that happened with the fender bender." I said, "Okay, okay. Even if there was one, there should be 1 accident." He said, "No, there are 2 on the same day." So you have this kind of spurious things that these credit bureaus are going around, and actually impacts you, whether you want to get a loan, you want to trade in your car, or whatever. And actually, we don't know. We are just at the behest of whatever data entry systems they have, and they can make mistakes. And to change it, it's like pulling teeth. You almost literally can't change it. You have to write to them and blah blah blah. With blockchain, actually, the beauty of it is you can actually see exactly your own data. At least if you want to see, you can see it. And I don't get into permissioning and so on, but we can have permission blockchains and public blockchains, and to a certain degree, you can actually access your own information, which is, I think, very powerful. Because if you don't do that, what happens is some centralized authorities, companies, and so on take advantage of it and do whatever they want, and you are paying the price for it. So
yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, because you think about the damage that can cause if there's not really an accident. You just bump someone, and yet if they recorded a certain way, you're kind of stuck with that.
It's
on your record
for a long time. Yeah, it's stuck with that a long time. And a lot of people, sometimes they're late on bills or whatever. It was settled, but then the late on bill might be on record, but the settlement not on record. So it's like you don't get the benefit of whatever reparations you've made. So this, I mean, I don't get started on credit bureaus.
Yeah, that's a whole other problem.
There's a lot of problems there. And but anyway, I think blockchain is a good solution for some of these things. That's all I'm saying.
So let's talk about the last thing that I really wanted to talk a little bit about is NFTs. So we hear about NFTs as being kind of art and selling something online. And then other people kind of look at it, and you have this like negative concept where, oh, well, it's just a way to kind of move money around because you're just selling a link to something, not really the ownership behind it. But, if you break it down, it's also like, you don't own the account that I have, yet there's value behind there that, so I don't know how NFTs kind of relate to, most businesses, or do they?
Yeah. So I can give a very long explanation, but let me try to condense it as much as possible, because NFT is actually a very, very, very powerful instrument. Okay. So I'll tell you what it means. NFTs are for asset tokenization. And these assets today, the sort of first wave of assets that we are looking at are these bored apes and crypto punks and crypto kitties and those types of things. These are all like digital art and so on. And every industry gets started somewhere. Like, MySpace started with musicians, and then it became, and then Facebook came along and made it generic. Anyone, and even Facebook was for students in a school, actually. That's why it was Facebook, like your class book kind of thing, your yearbook almost. But then it became general purpose. So same thing here. I think it's starting off with the bored apes and crypto kitties and crypto punks and all that, cyberpunks, I think, whatever it is. But anyway, my point is that's not the only use case. That's just a beginning. The idea is asset tokenization. So people are starting to tokenize real assets. I've got a project where we've got $6 billion worth of diamonds on the blockchain, and every blockchain entity has got a diamond, and we know the origin of the diamond. We know the owner of the diamond, and there's an ownership registry built in. So, for example, if you look at a person's life, the only two things that people record on any ledger is your house and your car. You can say that John owns this house or John owns this car. You can go and look it up in the city registry or your DMV, and then you'll know that you own the house or you own the car. But for everything else, we don't have a registry. So one of the use cases of blockchain is to record things so that there's a kind of a definitive proof that someone owns something, because that becomes very important if you want to get it insured and bequeathed and a bunch of other things downstream. Okay, so that's one use case. But NFTs are the tokenization of assets. So people are starting to use it for tokenizing real estate. And why tokenize real estate? Because now there's interesting possibilities. You can, let's say there's a strip mall and you don't have the money to purchase the strip mall. It costs $5 million. So now what happens is you take the strip mall and you tokenize it, and you can fractionalize it. So you can get 20 people that come together, each put a few $100,000, and then you buy this strip mall, and then you share in the rents that come out of that strip mall, let's say. So now you can tokenize things that you couldn't afford before. Now you can actually have a piece of the action. This was limited to people with a lot of wealth and had the funding or the banking facilities to do that. Now this opens up opportunities. So in one sense, NFTs create more inclusivity in the market. People who couldn't access certain asset classes can now actually do that through fractionalization of the token itself. So real estate is the prime example, and a number of companies are pursuing that particular angle, right? So that's a very important thing. So it creates opportunity. And I think another example I'll give you is commercial paper. So commercial paper is usually, if someone wanted to launch a bond would only be launched by a bank or a government usually. And even if a private institution, they'll have to go to Wall Street and issue a bond. Now, what happens is they borrow against that bond, and then use the proceeds to go and build a building or conduct some business practice and so on. Now, if you look at the NFT as some sort of a bond, you can now actually have a number of people investing in that NFT and use those proceeds to go do something. You can go make a movie and then give them back the returns from that movie. You can use it as a kind of a financial instrument to raise capital, actually. So I think these are types of use cases that I've seen some people start to leverage NFTs for, and I think over time more and more people start to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I always hear about it, like of people buying and selling artwork, or I hear a lot in the music industry, buying and selling album art. You can get an original album art, but you get the NFT of that. And from an outsider looking in, it looks like you're really just buying a link to that image. What's really behind that? It's not like I have something hanging in my wall.
Yeah. No, I think that will also change. I'm working on certain projects where the NFT is also sold in conjunction with the physical asset sometimes. And sometimes it's sold separate from physical asset. Like if you look at the Topps cards for baseball players, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're just buying the picture of the baseball player, and if that guy becomes a big deal, then your card appreciates in value. So
Mm-hmm.
that type of use case is also that we're working with the largest car auction company in America. And later on in the fall, early in the fall, we'll launch something where the cars being auctioned, you may not be able to buy the $1 million Bugatti Veyron or whatever, but you can buy a NFT of it, and if tomorrow a celebrity owns that car, that NFT could be worth a lot more. So like this, I think it creates sort of like derivative assets, just like you have stocks and you have options, which are derivatives of that underlying stock. You have NFTs can be derivatives of the underlying asset. So if you think of it like that, then there is some there's some new market of things that open up as well.
And what's the relationship to NFTs and the blockchain?
So NFT, so there are tokens, right? We all know about tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let me explain it in 3 ways. So in blockchain, a blockchain is not homogeneous. There's heterogeneous, right? There's Ethereum, there's Bitcoin, there's Solana, there's a bunch of different chains. Each chain, native chain tends to issue its own cryptocurrency, like ETH or SOL or Bitcoin or whatnot. Okay. Now, what happens is you can create tokens on top of these native cryptocurrency, and those are called tokens. And those tokens are called fungible tokens. That means, like, if you had a dollar bill in your wallet and I had a dollar bill, and we swap dollar bills, it's still the same. You can buy the same, and maybe not a dollar, but $5 bill, let's say. So you have $5 bill, I have $5 bill, and we swapped it, and we went to Starbucks. We can only get the same amount of coffee for the same $5. It's fungible. That means both sides are the same. Only a serial number might be different, but the value is the same. But non-fungible token means your NFT is, let's say, linked to your car, and my NFT is linked to my car, and yours might be a brand new car, mine might be an old car. And so what happens is the value of my NFT and value of your NFT are not the same. They're non-fungible. That means they're not of equal value to be transferred to one another. So that's what NFT actually means. So it's slightly different from fungible tokens. Now, both fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens have their sort of like their record keeping on blockchain. Who owns what? Which wallet is carrying what? All of that is maintained on blockchain. So that's how they both linked to blockchain.
Gotcha. So it's like they're both on that record keeping, which is kind of like a distributed spreadsheet, if you will.
Exactly. That's a good way to think about it, actually.
Okay, cool. So any other things that we need to be focused on when it comes to Web3 as tech leaders that are out there today that we maybe have lost sight of or haven't heard about yet that's coming down the pipeline?
I know some people might think that what I'm about to say is a bit far off, but I actually keep an eye on things because I'm also an educator. Mm-hmm. And quantum computing is making a lot of strides. Just for example, like 2 years ago, I looked at quantum computing, and there were some researchers, and it was within the sort of like domain of very few people. Okay, and I saw some videos that I think IBM and Google were introducing and things like that. Very few people knew about it. I just looked at it maybe a month ago, and I saw at least 10 universities offering courses on Coursera and other platforms that you could go and take on quantum computing and actually work on a quantum computer. If you want to get on your hands on keyboard, you can actually do that. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Now even Amazon has a quantum computing service. I forget the name, but they have something that you can actually plug into in AWS and start coding something, and it'll run something. And there's some quantum algorithms that leverage the capabilities of such a machine to begin with. I said, wow, this thing is coming along much faster than I thought. And why I say this is very, very important is because quantum computing reduces the time to do a lot of things, including cryptography. So your hash keys, which are 128 or 256K keys, are no longer secure, because a quantum computer can zip through that and do a brute force attack within hours, versus what is capable today. It's maybe 40 years to crack a code. It might be 40 minutes in the future. So So this technology is very important because all your keys of your Wi-Fi, your security on various devices, your communication protocols, all of those things will have to be updated because quantum computer could easily break that, including blockchain. So blockchains also use a lot of cryptographic keys, and all of those have to be re-examined to see whether they are quantum secure and things like that. But what it does do is now you have, like you talked about gaming and graphics, and all of that will become a lot better. Imagine, like, even if you have some jittery movie that you're playing on Netflix, you won't have that, because if everything, if your Roku box is running on a quantum computer, then it's gonna, like, really zip through things. It'll be very, very useful. And also for self-driving cars, things like that, which need a lot of computing power very quickly, I would think that at least some edge-based devices with quantum computing capabilities would be there. So that also opens up a whole sort of thing, a lot of computer vision type solutions, voice recognition, also facial recognition, all types of things like that, I think will become available very, very quickly. I think under 5 years, actually. I thought it'll be maybe end of the decade, but I think by 2025, 2027, you're going to start seeing commercial use cases.
Yeah, I think you're right. But doesn't quantum computing require like super cold environment, and it's just one of those things that, like, how do you mass deploy something like that?
The cooling and all that. Yeah, this always, if you look at, I'll tell you, even the early 90s, Intel was complaining, we couldn't cool down the Pentium chip. We have come a long way from the Pentium chip, 30 years later.
Yeah, true.
So they always complain about cooling, and I'm not saying it's a trivial thing, but the folks who work on these things are brilliant, and I always find that they find a solution for it. And I think I'm sure, just like previous examples, they will find solutions for not only cooling but also miniaturization. You don't need a kind of like a fridge-sized computer to do your quantum computing. You will have different iterations that could have a sliver of quantum computing versus a whole a fridge-sized computer doing the processing. So I think I always give credit to our engineers. They figure stuff out, and they'll figure this one out too.
So do you think we need to be ultra concerned about the cryptographic side of it? Because I actually saw an article. I was researching quantum computing probably a week and a half ago, because I was listening to a podcast. They were talking about it, and I saw something about China may have surpassed us as far as the research goes when it comes to quantum computing. Is that something we need to be concerned about when it comes to hacking and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern, and I think the Department of Defense always looks at these types of problems, and they actually issue the DES, AES encryption standards and so on in the past. And so they keep a very close eye on these types of things, because cryptography is nothing but trying to mask some data in the form, in a kind of a it just wraps the data in a different way. Okay, the only cryptography is actually you can actually unencrypt anything as long as you use if you put enough computing power. The only thing is, people don't do that because it takes 40 years to unencrypt certain things. So then what happens? You got better things to do with your life. But if you have a computer that can break through certain things very, very quickly, then of course the bad guys, they seem to be at the forefront of trying to break things always. So, and that also keeps the good guys, trying to step up their security. So yes, quantum computing is going to change the security landscape significantly. I think that's one of the dangers that we have to be aware of. But I do believe, again, we have, in the past, when this has happened, we've had, the government, actually, Department of Defense, especially in the US, takes the lead on such things. And they have a lot of strict protocols as to like what type of equipment can be brought in, what cannot be brought in. That's why you have all these regulations as to like how things can be sent over the air or not over the air, stuff like that. So, or over the wire and so on. So, I think there'll be changes. There'll be significant changes to upgrade the security infrastructure to accommodate quantum computing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. I think that's one thing we need to be paying attention to and seeing where that's going to be. I imagine we'll definitely have quantum computing in my lifetime, and I'm excited to see how that affects AI and stuff in the future. Well, Raghu, I really appreciate having you on. I feel like I learned a lot. We were able to cover a lot of things really quickly. How can people get in touch with you and connect with you and learn more about the things that you guys are working on?
So right now I've got a couple of emails going on because I just exited my company, but Raghu at NetObjex, NetObjex.com still works. And then Raghu at Kresus, KRESUS.com also works. Raghu spelled as RAGHU. So either of those mails or LinkedIn, ping me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer your questions or get in touch. So.
Awesome. And I'll put that LinkedIn on our show notes at geekleader.com so people can find that there. And again, Raghu, really appreciate having you on. I really love this conversation. I thought it was very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.